I've learned the products of Australia. It's absolutely fantastic. Australia have got such a unique resource of that. Seafood is phenomenal. I mean, oysters are, for me, the best oysters in the world are in Australia. I got extremely shocked, actually.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. In the 90s and early 2000s, French cuisine, led by a swag of incredible French bistros, were a dominant feature of Sydney's restaurant landscape. As our culinary landscape evolved, the colour and energy of many Asian cuisines took over and ran a new thread through the city. But in recent years, French made its presence felt again, thanks to some incredible operators. Antoine Moscovitz is the chef and owner of Bellevue Cottage by Antoine. Antoine, how are you going?
Yeah, pretty well, thank you. Very well.
You, almost a decade ago, opened your first French bistro in Sydney's suburbs, Antoine's Grill. What's French bistros been like from your perspective in Australia in the last decade?
Look, I think French bistro is a little bit more sophisticated than what it used to be, but it's still, it's reflecting like simple food, French classic, and I think the involvement with the years has been pretty phenomenal. But when I first opened, I think I was really going back to the basic, and I think quickly we had to really sort of step up, considering the crazy food of Sydney.
A couple of years into that restaurant, you were voted as one of the best French restaurants in Sydney. What was that like at the time? And tell us a bit about what you were doing at the restaurant, which made it so special.
Oh, look, I think we were just really sort of pushing hard, being, away from all the hip happening in Sydney, away from the CBD and Surrey Hills. And we were really had to push hard to, some people were questioning me as well. Why are you in Concord? Why are you so far from everyone? And I think just that already gave me that motivation to really sort of push and, show that we can try to, even on that, those location, like there's people actually enjoying, really top food. And it was great. It was a great reward. It was absolutely fantastic.
You're originally from Paris. Take us back to your youth. What was food like for you as a kid?
Look, food for us, for my family, was the only way to connect. So that was really the only thing that we would do with the family. We were not going to, football or share any other thing. It was really like a ritual every Sunday or every second Sunday. So yeah, so classic Sunday with the dishes of the family is definitely was the lamb was king. So it was a couple of leg of lamb, couple of leg shoulder of lamb. All the garnishes was really all beans, from green beans to white beans, cooked in different way, different style. The appetizers and all the aperitif, everyone was sort of showing their skill from, little pate and bread, all the fillers that you can have just before entering the. You had a couple of leg of lamb. Both my grandma were fighting about who's had the best dessert, pretty much. So we were they were sort of showing their skill, showing off. Sometimes ending up into an argument as well, and but that was quite fun. But it's good memories around that. Good memories around that.
What led to a decision to become a chef?
Look, funny as it seems, I never thought I was going to become a chef. And I remember I was 15 years old, back in the trend from school, and one of my friends was, talking about dropping school, becoming a chef, and it just clicked in my head. I'm like, wow, I think it's unusual to be a chef. Let's give it a crack. And I enrolled the next year, dropped school, and wow, that was a big step. And 3 months later, from being 15 years old, do what you do at 15 years old, you end up, on the back of the restaurant at minus 10 degrees, training a fish stock, and working 10, 12 hours, and you still, try to understand what's going on. And it took me a good year to realize where where I was going to put my feet into, and just realized that, well, this is very different. It's going to be serious now.
What was some of the really integral restaurants that you worked at in France in those early years?
Look, the first restaurant I worked, they were borderline. They were fighting for the past 3-4 years for their first Michelin star. And that's where it was very intense. When you try to reach that level, you want your first hat, you want your first Michelin star. You put everything into it. You're getting ready. And this is the first restaurant. It was only seafood, only fish. And that was quite fantastic. So the first restaurant where I spent 2-3 years, I was working in the same time I was a dreamer, like everyone, dreaming of, wow, I want to experience the Michelin star restaurant. So I was working extra on a Saturday evening and a Saturday during the day, actually, into a restaurant called Jacques Cagnat in the 7th quarter of Paris. So he had these 2 Michelin stars for a long, long time. And for me, there was like, in the movie Ratatouille, you go in and everyone's dressed in all the white. It's completely strict. You go section, chef de partie, pastry chef, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. Restaurant, of course, when not only in France, but after spending those few years in France, 4 or 5 years. In Australia, it was just definitely big experience as well here. So I just traveled. I went back to Australia, where I spent a few years, and went back to Paris, and definitely spending time at the Plaza Athénée with Alain Ducasse was, again, a different world.
Well, tell us a bit about what it was like working with Alain Ducasse and how different that kitchen was.
Yeah, look, you're jumping into a world of extremely strict, politically organized. It's a tough environment. You enjoy it. It's very unique, in the way where everything just goes in place at the same place. Every dish is calculated mathematically. It has to be a copy of everything that you do. It needs to be perfect, and you have people to make sure that everything is perfect. And that was, it's intense, but in the same time, it's very interesting.
What did you take away from your experience working there?
Look, I took away that I think it's some time. I think I took away that, look, spend some time in those places, but not too long. I would say take what you can and move away with that knowledge that, as much as you try to have everything perfect, sometimes, to have a burn hand on the meat, it sometimes makes the dish. And this is what I sort of realized that, look, it's time to, fly and try to see a bit of a new, different horizon. But that's fantastic. I mean, I've got people who start Alain Ducasse when they're 16 and they're still there now, and they're 45,
You've also worked as a private chef. Tell us how different that is, working in that vocation compared to a commercial kitchen.
Yeah, so look, that was a good look. When I finished actually at Alain Ducasse, the pay was so poor that I got introduced actually into that the house of Louis Audrey, which was very prestigious, and just to jump in, like that's it was smaller kitchen. Most of the time you're on your own, or you have a couple of guys working with you. You're the face of the whole thing. So everything that you do, you can't really blame anyone. So you into a situation where you got phenomenal supplier, and being a private chef, the people that I work for, it's an extravagance every day. But the lifestyle is definitely different.
Are there any events or occasions from that period of time when you were a private chef that really stand out for you that you can tell us about? Yeah,
look, in France, I was working for, the name of the person is called the Dr. Rousseau. So he was the owner of the Cristal Champagne, Broadway, and few wineries in France, and he was the head of the member of the Club of the 100. So the Club of the 100, very, very fortunate people, rich people in Europe, and they meet every Thursday, either in Maxime or I mean, am I still there? Or sorry, got like here's some echoes. So those guys used to meet every Thursday into a really either at Maxime or La Tour d'Argent and all those restaurants. They were actually discussing the Michelin star. They were discussing who's going to be next on the list, putting a bit of pressure on the Michelin, and that was fantastic because we used to host those events at the Club of the 100 once a year, and it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And then another just a quick story as well. We've done the presidential in the US. I worked as well in the US as the private chef, and we've done when Giuliani, some party politics were running for the presidential. It was quite unique to be in that kind of environment because it was just absolutely hectic.
Do you have any stories from that in the US that you can share?
Yeah, so look, in the US, the people I used to work for, they used to be really into the political game, and they used to receive a lot of very exclusive guests, and over 3 properties. So we had a property in Crystal Bay in Lac Tahoe, property in Belvedere Island, and of course in San Francisco. It was just from fundraising and the food had to be impeccable. We had people coming and trying the food. Secret services just checking everything to make sure there's no hick in the kitchen, so that was quite an interesting time.
What sort of food were you cooking in these roles? Can you give us an idea of where you were at as a chef at that time?
Look, at that time, actually, that's where really I became myself. I had the luxury of trying everything every day. If I wanted to perfect, I didn't understand. I was like cooking lobster for a while. I'm like, okay, my lobster is chewy every time. I don't understand why. I'm doing everything perfect, not happy. And I had the luxury of just buying lobster every day and trying and screwing it up every day and keep trying it. And this was actually the beauty. The food, we were actually pushing those people. They're being everywhere and they tested everything. So they can't even cook an egg, but they will tell you if the egg is cooked perfectly. So that was actually a bit more intense than what I thought.
What led to you coming down to Australia?
Look, there's 2 things. I was when in my 20s, just before 2000. I was dreaming like a lot of French guy, to go to Florida, and I studied Cuban cuisine. I wanted to go to Miami. I had everything ready for me. It was there, Miami. Let's go see the palm trees and the life. And I met my partner for the wife here in Bali, over a trip in Bali, and I'm like, oh wow, Australia is not too bad after all. And I moved to Australia, forgot Florida, and after a visa of a year, I quickly got a sponsorship here at the Sheraton in the city, and then stayed 5-6 years.
How different were the kitchens in Australia compared to what you were used to back in France?
Look, it was I didn't work at Alain Ducasse before that, and it was quite it was pretty well organized actually. It was. I was from the world in France where the hours are not counting. So that your day, you will spend 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 hours. You don't have schedule. In Australia, I remember, especially at the Sheraton on the park, it was, Antoine, you start at 7, you will be done at 2:30, and 2:30 is 2:30. And I remember I used to, I want to push, I want to stay, I want to, and it was pretty organized. It's the first time when I was in Australia that we got mixed leaf in a box, carrots pre-peeled, potatoes pre-peeled, garlic pre-peeled, fish in fillet, portion control. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm not sure. I wasn't really ready for that organization, which is great. But that was a big jump from the classic French to the organized Australian style modern way of cooking.
This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you. The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking to add a slightly firmer texture, so there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
Having grown up with the produce of France, in a produce sense, what excited you about Australia?
Yeah, look, it's I've learned the produce of Australia, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. There's a lot of product that we don't have access, that we have access in Europe, and vice versa. There's a lot of product that we don't have access in France that we have access in Australia, and there's no better. Or I think Australia have got such a unique resource of that. Seafood is phenomenal. I mean, oysters are, for me, the best oysters in the world are in Australia, and it's I got extremely shocked actually.
Before you opened your own restaurant, you worked in a couple of venues in Sydney. Tell us about those kitchens and what it was like for you working in Sydney.
Look, best experience I ever had in my life was with Luke Mangan at Salt in 2000, which was the peak of Salt restaurant, and I absolutely love it. And this was really in my career. I never worked with such a best team. Luke was fantastic. I was with, I think Morgan McGlone was there. Mark Holm was there. So many young guys. Absolutely loved it. Everyone was so dedicated to what they were doing. Everyone was trying everyone's food. It was so creative. It was, for me, this was the best 2 years actually of my career was at Salt. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it.
It won many accolades in its time. What was so special about it?
It was just the place to be. It was just the cooking was so modern, cutting edge. It was I loved it. The whole restaurant, the stuff on the floor, the dress code. Absolutely loved it. The small martini bar that we had, where we had a special, martini degustation was done extremely well. Degustation for fixed bar at the back was fantastic. Absolutely. So I love those flavors as well. Luke was really using this, like Vietnamese mint with scallops and dark. It was just really, really clever. I think it was one of the first who using all the Indian spices as well into that French, Japanese cooking. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely phenomenal.
In 2012, you opened your first French bistro, which we talked about at the top of the show. But tell us about the creation of Antoine's Grill and why you settled on Concord and what it was like trying to build such a great restaurant in the suburbs.
Look, I was, as a dreamer, I was looking for a restaurant in the city, in the CBD, and we looked, and the business partner that I had at the time, we looked extremely hard. We looked for months, and nothing was available unless you were, rent was astronomical. And we looked. I walked the street of Sydney many, many days just to look for the right venue, and we couldn't find anything. And we almost gave up. And living at Concord at the time, I came across that little busy street of Majors Bay Road, which is, cafes and chicken shop, a very suburban style street. And I came across that tiny hidden spot, and I thought, look, you know what? Let's give it a crack here, and let's see what, let's sort of practice here. And God, that was the ride. From being a chef to a business owner, this was the big slap. This was, oh my God.
Tell us about what some of the challenges were in the early days of transferring from just being a chef to business owner as well.
This is, like I said, it's not only a slap, but the ride has begun. Look, I wasn't ready. Exactly what when you have your first kid, doesn't matter how many books you read, how many classes you do, anything, you are absolutely never ready until it comes to life. And the restaurant, I absolutely had no clue. From spending 12 or 13 hours creating dishes, perfecting dishes, and the sous vide and phalanges, baby herbs and all that, to suddenly being on charge and responsible for the living of 4 or 5 staff in the kitchen, 4 or 5 staff on the floor, the wine, the knowledge, the computer, the system, it absolutely went crazy. So forget about the cooking. You have to really, it was just, look, it was madness. I'm not going to lie. It was just really, it was absolutely, and yeah, so this was definitely a big ride.
Well, it really became a hub of the community and became known as one of Sydney's best French restaurants. Tell us about the food that you were cooking and why you think it was so successful.
Look, first, when we first began, we thought, let's have a bit of an American twist and do a bit of a barbecue and these. So the first menu was actually, when I look at the first menu in the first few weeks, it was extremely, extremely basic because I had absolutely no time to focus on the food. Everything was just chewing up my time. So we were really simple and straightforward, and slowly, everything sort of went into place. And we're starting to develop the food around that sort of concept. We really had a big part of perfecting meat and the grill side. And that's what really, I think, we're taking people around this area and and in that suburb, because you could have, a bit of a fancy French, a bit of a bistro, but in the same time you could have your nice steak. And I just wanted to make sure it's not becoming an occasional restaurant, but really a restaurant that you can come back 1, 2, 3 times a week. And we had such a huge response from the local in Concord.
How have you seen Australian food, the Australian food scene change since you've been here?
Funny thing, it's in the past 10 years, it's been really going up and up and up and up, and always that strong Asian influence. I mean, all that, that barbecue and smokehouse, and I mean that, with very big pleasure the past 2-3 years, really, I think Sydney found its own identity. I think before it was really looking at what's going on in America, what's the latest trend here and there, and certainly you can see the same business, the same model in Australia. And now Australia really have that identity of what makes Australia cooking, and I think it's recognized everywhere in the world. I mean, there's always those big restaurants doing phenomenal food. And even small bistros and cafe now. I mean, you can get some phenomenal brunch in Sydney. It's well done to all those people, all the hard work, because it's fantastic.
With all these great restaurants that have emerged, well, how do you see a good night in a restaurant for you?
The funny thing, when you go to a 2-hat and a 3-hat, the hardest thing is you have so much expectation. You expect so much, not only because you know you're going to pay, you're just winning. There's so much pressure from the guy to the hat and you expect always more. And sometimes, I love getting surprised. And when you go to a little bit more humble restaurant, even a hat restaurant who's pushing hard for a second hat, or a cafe who's really trying to push to be into the restaurant and getting surprised by that some new dishes and new flavor. It's really exciting. I mean, the past 2-3 years, you can see there's some Afghanistan twists, some Afghan twists, some in modernized Indian, and when restaurant appears, you have some chef introducing that into really fine dining kind of scene, and I think it's great.
These days you have Bellevue Cottage by Antoine. It's a stunning old building. Tell us a bit about the site and what you're doing there.
So the site has been a bit of a journey. We were I was looking for a new site, moved from Concord, and we've looked at the site, fell in love with the site. It was on for tender, and again that was a bit of a journey. It took us over a year and a half to get the building, another 2 years to get the right DA, because at the beginning the city of Sydney owned the building, and the restriction was actually insane. You couldn't have a phone number for a booking. You had to close at 3 p.m. No liquor license. 30 people max. It was crazy. It was such a tease to have that phenomenal place on the water, one of the best locations in Sydney. And and so much restriction. I mean, the first time we had, I think, nearly 80 opposition letter from the local against RDA. And now we've got hundreds of letters for us. So we've turned the whole situation. All those people are now regulars, and they're actually supporting us even now through COVID. They're supporting us so much, and we love them. We love that Glebe community.
What sort of food are you cooking there these days?
Okay, so these days, I'm not going to talk about before COVID. These days, we first time never thought I was going to do a set menu. We've got a set menu, and I went extremely lean. We've got 3 starter, 4 main course, 3 desserts, and we try to rotate the menu as much as we can. But that's it. It's a very straightforward. We had to really readjust the whole business model since the first lockdown, I think 15 months ago, and really turn the whole business.
What sort of impact has the last year and a half had on you?
Look, with my business partner, we call it the COVID blessing for us. We actually got blessed by that situation, because I was starting to go mad with dreaming of, those hat restaurant, and our menu was insane. We had 5-6 starters and really proposing a lot of a high quality, and my food costing was terrible. The staff costing was terrible. We were 40% staff. And we were actually hitting the wall. And the COVID just gave us the chance to swim or die. And we decided to swim. We reshaped everything. We just simply have a formula for the business now. We've opened a cafe just on the bay, which is doing absolutely fantastic. The takeaway line is just picked up as well magically, and we've done that set menu. We preserved the stuff, and we just really we're actually blissful of that, because we were not going to be we were being out. We were being definitely close by now.
Food has always been an important part of your life, but what does it mean to you, and what do you love about what you do?
Look, what I love about what I do now, I actually switched now for the past couple of years from still being a chef, but also now you're more like a business owner after opening 2, 3, 4 restaurants. You really step into a different world where you really understand that it's a business decision. It's a business first, and the business is unfortunately to make money. So the food, I've got fantastic people working with me. We're trying to really follow our guideline in terms of costing, and try to, when you cook beef, you stay away from the eye fillet, all those luxury cut, and really try to really get into something where we can survive, and it's fantastic where we can come out with great creativity on those type of food.
Well, Antoine, it's great to hear a success coming out of COVID and difficult times. It's been great to have you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.